Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I have found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data, but there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Erma Ishara, Associate Facilitator at Equality Institute. This week, our conversation is about Walmart's free college tuition program expanding, Delta's new seat for accessibility, and much more. Let's get started. Erma, happy Monday. Tell us a little bit about yourself. First of all, I love working with you. So thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for everything you bring to our clients.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy having these conversations. I think talking about what is going right in DEI is really important. So I'm just so excited to be here today to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Hey, will you tell me, before we really get into the good vibes, how are you celebrating Pride?
Wow. When I think about like celebrating Pride, in this month particular, I just always want to be around like my friends and community, and to be outside, especially in Chicago. It's finally warming up, and I just want to be outside. I spent this past weekend at the beach, just like enjoying, just seeing people be visible. I think how I just celebrate Pride is just being more present and just like noticing how people are living their like daily lives. I saw like a Black queer person like riding their bike down the street in just this pleasant way, and it just warms me. And so that's how I celebrate Pride, is being more present. Of course, going out, all the parties and all the things, but just like noticing the people around me that just like show up in the world in a very beautiful way.
I love that. And I love the energy that you bring to this work, to our clients, and how you show up. You show up with the spirit of joy. You show up with the spirit of positivity, which aligns very well, obviously, with the work we do and our perspective on things. So thank you for that. And, last week when I was writing the newsletter, I gave you a shout out because the way you're showing up and bring the positivity that you're bringing to Pride is something that I'm benefiting from, because it's really easy to be discouraged with all the anti-LGBTQ laws being passed. So thank you for being a model for me in how to stay positive and find joy even when things can be bleak at times.
Yeah.
So what I what I wrote about as the intro story in this week's newsletter was about a man who was an early leadership influence on me, someone that he was my boss for a while when I was in high school, but I worked at a pharmacy. He was my dad's best friend. He co-owned the pharmacy. And when he wasn't working, wasn't working during the day and he had a night shift, he was a volunteer painter. And he painted places like senior homes and low-income facilities and transitional housing, and all these places he would just volunteer to paint. And he really inspired me, in terms of my own leadership journey, to think about leadership as service and to bring humility to leadership. And he certainly was a very humble man with his paint splattered glasses and paint splattered pickup truck, and all of the work that he did really showed up with a sense of humility. So I'm wondering, Erma, who was an early leadership influence on you? How did you start to learn your amazing leadership skills?
Oh wow. I learned my amazing leadership skills from my mom. If you talk to me, I talk about my mom a lot because I want to say like even she was my first job of just like also like being her personal assistant. And so like she taught me how to not only like speak, but like speak professionally. And so the way that she shows up in the world is exactly like the guy. And so like it was just that, like taught me how to volunteer on the weekend. Like I spent the weekends volunteering at veterinarian offices or building playgrounds for kids for accessibility so that they can play with other kids on the playground. So like she taught me that yes, life is like worth living, but like also give back to people. And she did it just in everyday life. Like you know, my parents used to like get on me a little bit because I'd be at school wanting to buy books, but if my friends couldn't get books from the book fair, I didn't feel good getting books. So I'd come home with a list of like, my friends wanted these books. Can you get them for them? And so like it just was instilled in me from a very early age. And so that's just how I show up as a leader. Like we're in this together and I'm here to support the people around me so that we can move forward and progress.
Awesome. I totally agree. I mean, we're going to go farther together when we go together. And certainly I continue to be reminded of our common humanity, right? And I think reminders of that are what build empathy and what build equity. You know, when we spend time in service with others, we're more able to see the gaps. We're more able to see the opportunities and ways to create equity within our own within our own systems. And so I think it's really important to stay connected to all of that, especially when we're in this work.
For sure.
All right, so let's move into this week's Good Vibes. The first story comes from Walmart, which has a free college tuition program called Live Better You. That tuition program offers learning paths, college preparation classes, degree programs to Walmart employees through partnerships with Morehouse and other colleges and universities, including some historically Black colleges and universities. So now this awesome program, which has been participated in by more than 100,000 associates, now it's expanding to Canada. So I love this program in general. I love Walmart's continued investment in it, and I think it's just a great, great program.
Yeah, it really sounds like an amazing program, especially like when you go into Walmart, you see who is working there. A lot of, in my experience, are Black workers. So being able, one, to just have access to historically Black colleges through this program, and the expansion to Canada and the continued investment, like you said, is just truly inspiring. So it was just wonderful just to read up on that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree, especially because a lot of times, like you said, frontline employees are disproportionately BIPOC, they're disproportionately low income, they're disproportionately undervalued and underinvested, yet they saved us during COVID. Like we needed them. And I'm really proud to see, or happy to see, a lot more resources redirected towards them because I think that they've historically been taken for granted.
Mm-hmm. And also for it to be like online learning, you know, when you're working at those jobs, those laborious jobs, you know, you don't have access to go in person all the time or the time to do that. So to be able to learn on your own time and, you know, have it be flexible is really important for thinking of like accessibility for people to like continue their education.
Absolutely. And of course, the benefit for Walmart is employees who are more likely to stick around. So higher retention rates, and making it a more attractive place to work. So especially during a competitive job market. So wins all around. Okay, the second story comes from the Grace Hopper Celebration, which is a prominent technology conference. So what they have decided is that their planned September conference, which is going to be held in Florida, will happen. But due to Florida's anti-diversity legislation and state mandated restrictions, the conference organizers have decided to move subsequent years' conferences away from Florida unless that legislation is overturned and the state becomes more welcoming to us all. And this is a really big, big conference. So I would love to see more of this happen.
Yeah, I too would love to see more of this happen because when these conferences and these places, like knowing who are going to be in attendance and bringing them into these like states that aren't welcoming and putting them in harm's way. And so like rethinking of like what, not only changing like the landscape of what, Florida would look like, but also keeping in mind like who's going to be attending and their safety.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, this is all about safety, right? And so when the state of Florida and other states are restricting the rights of people, not just LGBTQ plus people, but other people as well, when they are restricting these rights, when they're really setting a stake in the ground and taking away DEI funding from public universities, they're really saying to folks from historically marginalized backgrounds, you're not safe here. We don't want you to show up authentically. We want you to assimilate, right? Essentially, that's what they want, is assimilation and homogeneity.
Yeah.
And it's totally a political issue. I can get really worked up about this.
Oh no, I could too. I'm just like, especially when it comes to, I'm from the South, and so when I see these like laws being passed and legislation being proposed, it really is disheartening to feel like I can't go back home, or I don't, I'm not going to be safe to go back home, or, to be close to my family. And so it's just really disheartening to see. But stories like this really inspire that, like, people are speaking up, and hopefully something will change in those areas.
Yeah, it's this kind of pressure is what causes the change, right? Pressure that involves dollars. All right. The third story comes from the Biden-Harris administration, which announced a whole bunch of new actions to protect LGBTQI plus communities in response to the anti-LGBTQ state legislations being passed around the country. So there's a big list of commitments and actions developed to safeguard rights, support LGBTQ plus youth, and address book bans. So they're doing a lot of things within their own control to try to say, you know what, even if on the state level you can't be safe, we're looking out for ways to support you on the federal level.
Yeah, federal protection is extremely important. So
more important.
And so seeing this really was hard. Like it really just got to my heart a bit because it was a lot. It was a things that they were proposing.
Exactly. All right. So let's move on to something that's not LGBTQ plus related. Delta Airlines is developing a new first of its kind airline seat that allows wheelchair users to stay in their chairs. So this involves a partnership with a UK firm called Air for All, and involves modifying the seat to accommodate a wheelchair, eliminating the need for passengers to transfer to an airline provided wheelchair. So it improves accessibility, reduces the risk of damage to expensive and personalized mobility devices, and just makes it better for folks to get around.
When I saw this, I was like, about time,
right?
About time. And it's great that it's happening right now because I think it also just offers people like autonomy and dignity to be able to move around and of course, not damage very expensive wheelchairs and devices. So, yeah.
Exactly. And by the way, I'm aware of my privilege that I don't even need to worry about this, right? So my mobility privilege, just want to acknowledge that as I talk about that story. All right. The fifth and last story this week comes from Portugal, which just launched a government-funded 4-day work week trial. So it's the latest country to experiment with a 4-day work week using a 6-month pilot program in collaboration with 4-day work week global, where 39 private sector businesses will implement a 4-day work week without reducing employee pay.
Yeah, send me to Portugal.
Right?
That is just amazing to see. I in the article in the newsletter where it said 72% of Portuguese labor force workers work over 40 hours per week. And that's third behind US and Ireland. So just seeing, that being, with that such high number that they're looking to see what they can do to change that, it was absolutely inspiring.
Absolutely, because the whole idea here is to reduce stress, to reduce burnout, and improve worker retention. So the pilot has worked well in other countries like the UK. So hopefully we will start to see this have a ripple effect, not just throughout the rest of Portugal, but throughout the rest of the world, and maybe one day even here in the US.
Yes.
Well, if that happens, people can certainly read about it in the 5 Things newsletter or hear about it right here on 5 Things in 15 minutes. This week's call to action is to learn about Gina Rosero, the Filipina. Let's do that over. Matthew, this week's call to action is to learn about Gina Rosero, the Filipina transgender fashion model and activist. And she has a new book out called Horse Barbie, which I'll plan to read after I'm finish Elliot Page's memoir, Page Boy, which I'm currently reading. So check out Horse Barbie, read about Gina Rosero. You can read about more in the show notes. Check it out. And Erma, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been fun. I really appreciate you filling in.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And for folks who don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.